Well, good evening. I want to welcome you to continue our discussion on mental health. We have this evening, I want to welcome you, Ms. Wendy Wilcox, Director of Bowie Youth and Family Services, and Mrs. Kimberly Walker, a school mental health clinician. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to get right started with our questions. For you, Mrs. Wilcox, what kind of services does the city provide to youth and families to address mental health challenges, including suicide prevention, and how can families access these services?
We're very fortunate in the city because we have lots of support from the city government. We have a whole agency within the city government, Bowie Youth and Family Services, that provides family counseling, individual counseling, group counseling, mentoring, and other services for families in the city. So if someone's having a crisis, they can call us, and we have someone available every day from 10 to 5, Monday through Friday, who can talk the family or whomever calls through that crisis and help them access proper resources. All our therapists are licensed and have years of experience working with kids and families. So we also provide services that are not necessarily continuous services. So if there's some sort of a tragedy that occurs, like that affects a lot of young people or the community as a whole, we can tailor our services to address that and go out in real time and support people.
Wonderful, thank you. Mrs. Walker, can you please talk about what you have observed about the mental health needs of high school students over the past few years, and how has the COVID-19 pandemic impacted this?
So I'll say from my experience working with adolescents and young children who have come out of the pandemic, there's a lot of anxiety and depressive symptoms due to the isolation. And because they've missed out on some of their high school socialization activities or middle school socialization activities, they are having a hard time adjusting to these grades that they're now introduced to. So we've had middle schoolers who are now coming in as high school freshmen, or we've had, freshmen who have done 2 years virtually and now are expected to start, touring colleges and planning out their future careers. So we've seen a lot of stress and anxiety and pressure from not only themselves, but also from their guardians to say, we need some assistance to help to get you to college.
Absolutely. Ms. Wilcox, what are some signs that someone may be suicidal? What should you do?
Okay, so the signs are first initial signs of sadness, extreme emotions, sometimes anger. Sometimes people will just talk about feeling suicidal, feeling like they wish they weren't here, talking about hopelessness. Sometimes you have things that people will give away things that they care about, or will talk about giving up in an explicit way. And the real important thing is whether the young person is specific or whether they're more broadly looking as though they're depressed or having trouble. It's important to check it out. And it is a false idea that people sometimes have that talking about suicide will give someone the idea. It never gives a person the idea when someone checks in with them, and research has shown that. So it's very important for families, parents, caring adults to bring up the subject if they're worried about someone, because that's how that person can access the help that they need.
Great. How can we support families grieving a loved one who passed or died by suicide?
Well, the most important thing that families need if they are going through that tragedy is listening. People need to know that people are thinking about them. Sometimes folks are afraid to bring up the topic because there is a stigma that we shouldn't have. around talking about suicide, and sometimes that inadvertently sends the message to families that they should feel ashamed. So it's very important to be explicit about offering support. It's important to listen. It's important to acknowledge feelings without telling people how they should feel. And most importantly, it's important to avoid certain phrases that are sometimes overused, like "you need to get on with life," or "they're in heaven now, so they're okay, so you shouldn't worry." There are things like that that people tend to say with the intent of being supportive that does not feel like support to those family members.
Absolutely. What does the high school do, Mrs. Walker, around suicide prevention, and what resources are available for youth that may be suicidal or experiencing mental health challenges?
So I will say that the county put my position in place to be able to address some of those mental health concerns. And I do a lot of collaboration with the school counselors and administrators to where, we're planning, we're organizing what the need is, and then they're actually going into some of the classrooms and having these conversations with students to see what is the need in the school setting. Myself, I'm doing some of the individual and group sessions as well as bringing mental health initiatives to the school to allow students to feel safer about bringing these issues to the forefront.
Absolutely. Great. So how can you start a conversation with their families about mental health?
So typically it happens naturally. Whenever I have students who come into my office, we do have the consent process. So I'm always introducing the conversation to saying, hey, this service is offered to every school in the county. My position here is for any student who comes to my office, I just get a consent in case they feel comfortable. I let them know the various of services I offer and the collaborative community partners like Bowie Youth and Family Services, and how we make referrals to them as well as other organizations in the county. And I start to address, what are some of the issues that may come up, whether it's now or down the line.
Absolutely. Mrs. Wilcox, what number can they call if they need help?
They can call 301-809-3033. That is our direct line to Bowie Youth and Family Services. And also they can call the city line, 301-262-6200, and ask the operator to be connected to Youth and Family Services, and they can get to us that way too.
Okay, awesome. I want to thank you both for sharing this time on this very important topic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.